The email came in at exactly 4:57 p.m. A single, sterile subject line: meeting tomorrow, mandatory. I had been with the company for 15 years, and in all that time, I had never received an email like this. Something in my gut twisted. I knew what was coming. For months, there had been whispers, small layoffs here, restructuring there. The higher-ups spoke in carefully crafted corporate language, but I could read between the lines. And now, my name was on the chopping block. I had given this company my everything: long nights, weekends, missed family events, only to be discarded like yesterday's news. But here's the thing: they thought they had the upper hand. They had no idea that I was already 2 steps ahead. I arrived at the meeting the next morning, a conference room filled with nervous energy. Faces I had worked alongside for years sat around the table, their eyes darting between the blank whiteboard and the manager standing stiffly at the front. Then came the words: "We appreciate your years of dedication, but due to restructuring, your role has been made redundant." The HR rep, barely able to look me in the eye, slid a folder across the table. Inside, a severance package, modest at best, insulting at worst. They expected shock, maybe anger. Instead, I smiled. I had been waiting for this moment, preparing for it in ways they couldn't even imagine. What they didn't know is that, for the past year, I had been silently building something of my own. Every spare moment had gone into planning, strategizing, and securing my future beyond this company. The moment they dismissed me, they unknowingly set me free. As I closed the folder and looked up, my boss gave me a small, rehearsed nod, thinking the matter was settled. But I had one last move to play, one that would leave them speechless. And they never saw it coming. I walked out of that conference room with my head high, my severance folder tucked under my arm like a trophy. They thought they had crushed me, that I would leave feeling powerless, maybe even desperate. But they were wrong, because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of theirs. As I made my way back to my desk, the whispers began. Colleagues who had been friendly just days ago now avoided my gaze. A few brave ones offered sympathetic nods, while others kept their heads down, pretending they hadn't seen me. I understood why. The fear of job loss was contagious, and no one wanted to be next. Samantha, my closest coworker, hurried over. "I can't believe this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "After 15 years? This is how they treat you." I gave her a small smile. I saw it coming. Her brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "Let's just say I've been preparing for this. They think they blindsided me, but the truth is, they're the ones in for a surprise." Her eyes widened, curiosity flickering beneath the worry. I didn't elaborate. Not yet. The first signs had been subtle. A budget cut here. A sudden change in leadership there. Then, last quarter, an internal memo had leaked, something about streamlining operations, which was just corporate speak for downsizing. And even though my department had consistently delivered results, I knew how the game worked. They wanted fresh blood, new ideas, younger, cheaper employees who didn't remember the long hours, the sacrifices, or the company's real history. But the real betrayal had come from someone I once considered a mentor, Daniel Carter, my direct supervisor. He had been my boss for over a decade, always acting like he had my back. But I had noticed the shift. The way he stopped looping me into big meetings. The way he praised my work in public but undermined my authority behind closed doors. And the biggest red flag? 2 months ago, my access to key client data had been quietly revoked. I had confronted him about it once. "Dan, I don't have access to the client reports anymore. Was there a mistake?" His expression had been carefully neutral. "Oh, that? Just an IT issue. Nothing to worry about." But I had worried, and I had taken action. For the last year, I had been working on something in secret. A side business, built from everything I had learned at this company. I had spent nights studying our industry's shifts, seeing where the gaps were, and slowly positioning myself to step into that space. I wasn't just another employee. I had connections, experience, and now motivation. I had built relationships with our top clients. I knew what they wanted, what frustrated them. I had spent years fostering trust, and I knew one undeniable truth. Loyalty in business doesn't come from company logos. It comes from people. And I had made sure that when the time came, they would remember me, not the company. So when I received that termination notice, I didn't panic. Because I already had meetings lined up. As I was clearing out my desk, another familiar face appeared, Kevin, a mid-level manager from another department. He hesitated before speaking. "Hey, I heard what happened. Just be careful." I narrowed my eyes. Careful of what? He glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. Word is, they're not just letting you go. They're making sure you can't take anything with you. A slow smirk formed on my lips. They thought they could block me. How cute! I had already prepared for this. Every bit of knowledge I needed was in my head, not on their servers. And the relationships that mattered? They were already outside of this office. Before I left, I stopped by Daniel's office. He was expecting me, probably thinking I would beg for reconsideration, maybe try to negotiate a better severance package. Instead, I walked in with confidence. "Dan," I said, settling into the chair across from him. "I just wanted to say thank you." His eyes flickered with confusion. "Thank you." "Yes," I nodded, "for showing me exactly how much loyalty is worth in this company." A flicker of unease crossed his face. "Look, it wasn't personal. These decisions." I cut him off. "Oh, I know. That's what makes it so much sweeter." I stood up, extending my hand. "Good luck, Dan. You're going to need it." As I walked out of the office, I could feel his confusion hanging in the air, because he had no idea what was coming next. I stepped out of that building for the last time and took a deep breath of the fresh air. The world felt bigger, freer. I wasn't shackled to a desk anymore. I wasn't another disposable cog in their machine. That night, I made my first call. "Hey, it's me," I said when the client picked up. "I heard about the issues you've been having. I think I have a solution for you." And just like that, the real game began. The moment I stepped out of that office, I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a competitor. And the company that had tossed me aside like an afterthought had no idea that they had just created their worst nightmare. That first phone call was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, I reached out to every client I had built a relationship with over the years. Some were surprised to hear from me, others expected it. What they didn't expect, however, was the alternative I presented. "Look," I told them, "I know exactly what you need. I've been handling your accounts for years, and I know the gaps in service that have been holding you back. I'm building something new, something better. And I want you to be part of it." Clients listened. Some hesitated, afraid of cutting ties with a large corporation. But others? They were tired of bureaucracy, of delayed responses, of feeling like just another number on a spreadsheet. They wanted results, and I was offering them exactly that. But as I made my moves, the company started catching on. It started small. An ex-colleague, Samantha, sent me a text. "Heads up, management is talking about you. They're calling clients, trying to get ahead of you." I smirked. Of course, they were. I wasn't just some disgruntled former employee. I was a threat. And threats had to be neutralized. Days later, I received an official-looking letter in the mail, company letterhead, legal jargon, all meant to intimidate me. Cease and desist. Non-compete agreement. Violation of company policies. I chuckled as I read it. They were panicking. They wanted to scare me into stopping before I could do real damage. But they had underestimated me again. See, I had been preparing for this moment long before they even considered firing me. I had read every document I had signed. I knew exactly where the loopholes were. I called my lawyer, someone I had quietly retained months before my termination. He skimmed the letter and let out a short laugh. "They don't have a case," he said. "They're bluffing. Your non-compete clause is weak, and they can't enforce it the way they're claiming." That was all I needed to hear. While I was growing stronger, my former company was unraveling. I wasn't the only one they had pushed out, and the cracks were starting to show. Samantha kept feeding me inside information. "Clients are complaining about the transition," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "They're realizing you were the one actually keeping things running smoothly." I grinned. "And management? They're scrambling. Daniel is in full damage control mode. I leaned back, satisfied. Perfect. Then, the real bombshell dropped. They're losing a major client. One of your biggest accounts. That was huge. That client had been with the company for years, contributing millions in revenue. If they pulled out, the fallout would be devastating. And guess who they had just called for a meeting? The morning of my meeting with the major client, I walked into the high-rise office downtown, greeted by the familiar receptionist who used to see me with my old company. "Good to see you again," she said, smiling. "You too," I replied. But this time, I'm not here as their rep. I'm here as the competition. Inside the boardroom, the client's senior team sat across from me, their expressions serious. "We've heard about what you're doing," the CEO said, leaning forward. "We also know the issues we've been having since your departure." I didn't gloat. Not yet. I simply laid out my vision. "You know my track record. I delivered results for you, and I can continue delivering results, only this time, with complete control over quality, service, and innovation. No more corporate red tape. No more delayed responses. Just solutions that actually work for you." Silence. Then, the CEO nodded. "We're interested." That was it. The moment the tides turned in my favor. That same afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello? Michael. It's Daniel." I almost laughed. Of course it was. "I think we should talk," he said. "About what?" I asked, feigning innocence. A sigh. "We know you've been speaking with our clients." "Oh," I said, pretending to be surprised. "Well, they called me." "You're making a mistake," he warned. "There's still a chance to resolve this professionally." I leaned against my desk, enjoying the moment. "Daniel, let me be clear, you fired me. You underestimated me. And now, you're realizing exactly what I was worth to your company." Silence. "I'll make this easy for you," I continued. "You let me go, and you assumed I'd disappear. But instead, I'm thriving. And your company? It's falling apart. So, tell me, Daniel, who really made the mistake?" He had no answer. And for the first time, I knew I had one. 2 months later, my new business was fully operational. Clients had transitioned, revenue was growing, and my team, composed of some of the best talent I had recruited, was thriving. As for my old company, Samantha sent me one final text. "Daniel resigned today. Upper management is in chaos." I smiled, shaking my head. It was only a matter of time. They had tried to cast me aside, thinking I was disposable. Instead, they had unknowingly built their own downfall. And as I looked at the growing empire I was building, I realized one thing. Revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about getting ahead. 2 months had passed, and my new business wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Clients had followed me, my team was expanding, and the industry was buzzing with whispers about how my old company was struggling. But I wasn't done yet. The real moment of reckoning came when I received an email from an unexpected source, a board member from my former company. Subject: "Can we talk?" I smirked as I read it. The very people who had dismissed me so easily were now reaching out, scrambling to understand what had gone wrong. They wanted to have a conversation. I was more than happy to oblige. I walked into the same glass-walled corporate office I had left months ago, but this time, I wasn't an employee. I was a competitor they desperately needed to understand. The boardroom was filled with familiar faces, executives who had once barely acknowledged me, now visibly tense. Daniel wasn't there. He had resigned in disgrace after losing several high-profile clients. The company was hemorrhaging money, scrambling to repair the damage. The board member, a silver-haired man with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, gestured for me to sit. "Michael," he started, his voice measured, "we'd like to discuss opportunities." I leaned back, arms crossed. "Opportunities." He cleared his throat. "We recognize that mistakes were made. Decisions were rushed. And, well, we didn't realize the extent of your value to the company." I nearly laughed. Now they saw my value? Now, after gutting my role, underestimating my impact, and watching their clients walk out the door, I tilted my head. "Go on. We'd like to explore the possibility of Reuniting in some capacity, he continued. Perhaps a partnership. Or, he hesitated, as if it physically pained him to say it, a potential acquisition of your company. That was their solution? Buying me out? Reabsorbing what they had lost? I let the silence stretch before speaking. Let me get this straight, you fired me. You cut me loose without hesitation. And now that I've built something better, you want to buy me out? The board members shifted uncomfortably. Think about what's best for your future, Michael, another executive chimed in. You could come back in a leadership role. A significant one. I shook my head, amused. You still don't get it, do you? They stared at me, confused. I'm not looking for a way back in, I said. I'm looking forward. And I have no intention of slowing down. The silver-haired board member sighed. Michael, we're offering you a chance to secure long-term stability. I leaned in, my voice steady. You had 15 years to recognize my worth. You didn't. Now, you're paying the price. I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. My answer is no. The silence in the room was deafening. As I walked toward the door, I paused. Oh, and one more thing, I added. They looked up, dreading what I would say next. Your biggest remaining client? I smirked. They're meeting with me next week. The shock on their faces was priceless. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that boardroom, out of that building, and out of their lives for good. They had dismissed me like I was nothing. But now, they would never forget my name. The moment I stepped out of that boardroom, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The same company that had tossed me aside was now desperate to win me back. But I wasn't interested. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about proving, to myself and to them, that my worth had never depended on their validation. They needed me. I didn't need them. Over the next few weeks, the industry buzzed with rumors. Employees at my former company were panicking, unsure of their futures. More clients started reaching out, interested in what I was building. The company's stock price took a hit, and whispers of an internal shakeup began to circulate. And me? I was too busy winning to care. My new business wasn't just a reaction to being fired, it was something greater. I had built a company on integrity, efficiency, and actual care for the clients we worked with. No corporate politics, no unnecessary bureaucracy, just results. I brought in some of the best people from my old network. Not just those who had been mistreated like me, but also fresh talent, hungry, driven individuals who saw the flaws in the traditional system and wanted to do better. Within 6 months, we had surpassed expectations. We weren't just competing with my old company anymore. We were outpacing them. And that major client I had met with? They officially signed on. One evening, I received an email from an old colleague, Samantha. Subject: I quit. I chuckled, shaking my head as I read her message. Michael, I can't take it anymore. Ever since you left, things have been spiraling. Management doesn't know what they're doing, morale is at an all-time low, and honestly, I want to work somewhere that actually values people. Are you hiring? I leaned back, feeling a deep satisfaction settle in. The company that had once controlled my life was crumbling under its own mismanagement. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I typed back, let's talk. One night, I sat in my home office, looking over everything I had built. The team, the clients, the freedom, I had created it all from nothing. And it hit me. Losing my job had been the best thing that had ever happened to me. 15 years of loyalty had been rewarded with a termination notice. But instead of breaking me, it had set me free. They thought I'd be another forgotten ex-employee. Instead, I became their biggest regret. I stood up, stretched, and smiled. Because in the end, I didn't just get even. I got ahead. Looking back, it's almost laughable how they thought they had control over my fate. They assumed I would take their decision, accept their severance package, and fade into the background. But they had underestimated me, just like they underestimated the cost of losing someone who truly cared about their business. In their arrogance, they had unknowingly fueled my greatest success. As I walked into my own office, I took a deep breath, soaking it all in. The space was alive with energy, filled with people who were driven, passionate, and committed to something greater than corporate politics. We weren't just a company. We were a force. One day, I received an invitation to a networking event where my former company's executives would be present. The irony wasn't lost on me. I went. Not to gloat, not to confront, but to be seen. When I entered, a few familiar faces turned pale. Others averted their gaze. And then there were the whispers, because now I was the name that people were talking about. One of the executives, clearly nervous, approached. "Michael, it's been a while." I smiled, shaking his hand. "It has." A pause. "You've done well for yourself." I nodded. "Yeah, I have." No need for arrogance. No need for revenge. Just a simple truth. Because at the end of the day, success is the best response. As I left the event, I felt nothing but peace. They had written me off, but I had rewritten my own story. And the best part? I was just getting started.